Hey guys, Weather Steve here. How you doing? It's been a while since I've done one of these. It's been like since March or something. Almost forgot how to do these. But we have an absolutely incredible hurricane churning out there in the Atlantic. Let me tell you, one of the most strongest hurricanes on record here. This is a historic storm. Last storm that was this strong was Hurricane Allen back in 1980. So it's been since 1980 since we had a storm of this magnitude. It is very possible, there is a chance that this becomes the strongest hurricane on record here. Very possible. So we are going to definitely continue to monitor the situation here. Just look at this eye here. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. I mean, this image here is truly a hurricane. This is the most, if you were to talk about a hurricane and what it looks like, this is exactly what it looks like here. We have a very powerful Category 5 hurricane on our hands right now, and just incredible, just incredible. I mean, some of the Leeward Islands are already getting or feeling the effects from Irma's outer bands here, but these northernmost Leeward Islands right up in here are going to be the ones that I think are going to get a direct hit. She's starting to make a west-northwest movement here. So she was moving westerly for most of the day, or, you know, overnight into the morning here, and now she has started turning north and west here. This is the outer view, or the wider view of the Atlantic here. By the way, we have Tropical Storm Jose right behind Irma. Let me tell you, man, this is an active hurricane season here. I mean, to have a tropical storm and then a major hurricane ahead of it is just incredible. But that's what's going on here. I mean, this is what we've got. And basically right now, we've got this area of high pressure right in here. And this is basically what's steering Irma. Basically, you got these clockwise winds, and this is what's forcing her to the north and west, and or at least to the west at this point. And she does pose a risk to northeast Puerto Rico. I don't think she's going to make a direct landfall into Puerto Rico, but certainly coming very, very close there. And then I believe she will make a track close to the Dominican Republic. Again, I don't think she's going to make a landfall there. And then she then moves into areas just right in between Honduras and Cuba here, and this is going to be a very critical movement here. If she moves right over Honduras, it's very possible she'll weaken a little bit. If she, you know, moves sort of south of Honduras, it is very possible she'll actually continue to strengthen. The question then becomes, is she going to move like this, or is she going to move something like this? And the question is she going to actually make landfall into Cuba? Okay, because if she makes a landfall into Cuba, she is going to weaken significantly. I mean significantly. So the chances of her making landfall as a Category 5 will be extremely low, at least in the United States. But if she does not make landfall into Cuba, if she just hovers the Cuban coast, we have a very, very dangerous situation for Florida. Even if she does make landfall into Cuba, it is very possible she actually strengthens once she gets out of there, because the waters in this area right in here are very prime. We have about 86 to about 89 degree water in this area. So basically, we are looking at very warm waters. And again, sometimes waters down below the surface are cooler. And so when you get a hurricane, it sort of churns up the water there, and some of the cooler waters start working their way up. But with these waters out in the Caribbean here, it is basically it goes through the whole surface. It goes relatively deep into the ocean, where we have these 86 to 89 degree water temperatures. And this is the reason why, if she does not hit major land masses, she is just going to continue to strengthen, and the potential is there that she'll actually continue to strengthen even more than what she's already at right now. So we're going to keep our eyes out on that. That is something that is going to be significant. The critical day here is going to be Thursday. That is going to be the critical day as far as what's going to happen here with track and intensity of Irma. Now, here is the current information here from the National Hurricane Center. They have, from all of the data that they've seen, their maximum sustained winds are about 185 miles an hour. She's a Category 5 hurricane with minimum central pressure of 926 millibars. So, formidable storm here. Absolutely incredible stuff going on here. So, let me show you here what's going on, because there is a lot of watches and warnings out here. So, first and foremost, her first stop, again, the Northern Leeward Islands. Okay, there is a hurricane warning for the Northern Leeward Islands. There is a hurricane warning for all of Puerto Rico, including the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then we got a hurricane watch out for the north coast of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And then we've got a hurricane watch for the southern Bahamas. And from there, the question is then going to become, is she going to take a track something like this? Or is she going to then make a track something like this? And is she going to actually make landfall into Cuba? That is the critical question at this point. Now, I would caution going too far to the south and west here. I really don't think that we're going to get a track something like this. This, I think, is not going to happen as per the Canadian model. However, I could see a track that goes something like this, okay, where she hovers along the west coast of Florida, or making actually a landfall somewhere on the west coast of Florida. Likewise, I also see the potentials of her coming up like this and perhaps making a landfall somewhere along either the East Florida coast, Georgia coast, or southern parts of South Carolina. That is my cone, okay, for the United States at this point. It is pretty much etched in stone, the track that she's going to take about to here. Okay, that is basically pretty much etched in stone. Almost all of the models take her just to the north of Puerto Rico, north of the Dominican Republic, and basically somewhere in here. So that's basically pretty much etched. Okay, now the National Hurricane Center has sent out the Air Force reconnaissance here and has done several trips into Irma today. And the first one earlier on this morning sort of took a track something like this. I'm not sure if they they might have went around and then down like this, but nevertheless, they found that she had 930 millibar pressures here earlier on, and they were saying that she was a pretty strong, I believe a strong category 4, or no, a category 5 at that point is when they said that. And then out in here, they figured out that perhaps the pressure increased a little bit, and then over the past several hours, she has undergone rapid, and I mean absolutely rapid intensification. She has dropped down to 926 millibars, really since the early to mid-morning hours. So this is absolutely incredible. And, you know, basically hurricanes are broken up here into quadrants, okay? And basically, the center is, of course, the eye, so that's this part right in here. Now, notice there are some heavy winds here out in here. So basically, anywhere on the northern side of the eye wall, and typically the northeast quadrant, or the upper right quadrant of the storm, has the absolute strongest winds. But there are some heavy winds here north and west of the eye wall. But typically on the western flank of the storm is where we get the heaviest rain. So the eastern side, particularly the northeastern side of the storm, is where you get the strongest winds. The western side is where the heaviest rains are. Now, short-range models are, again, somewhat diverging now. We sort of saw most models sort of pretty much in very narrow. Now, up to this point here, almost all of the short-range hurricane models here take her north of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So I think that's pretty much etched in stone. This is over the course of the next 48 hours, or the next 2 days here. Pretty much things are pretty much clustered. We pretty much know her track. Things start to diverge in about 3 days here, 3 days time, and that's where we see this very, very slight, this is like 100 miles here, so it's a very, very small shift here. But it makes a pretty relatively large difference in what's going to end up happening, because of the fact that if she takes this northeasternmost track, she will more than likely end up going along the east coast of Florida into South Carolina or Georgia. At this point, the farthest, and I mean the absolute farthest north I could see this going, is Wilmington, North Carolina, or somewhere in northern parts of South Carolina. That is the absolute furthest north. So if you live, you know, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, Virginia Beach points north, you know, mid-Atlantic, New England, the window is significantly closing here, and I just don't think that there's going to be a landfall here in the Northeast in New England. So we have dodged this bullet, which is very good, because let me tell you, this would have been devastating for the Northeast if that were to happen. Now, again, the models sort of diverge yet again. So there's the question, is she going to make landfall into Cuba? And at this point in time, most of the models are saying no. She is going to be a very near miss. But we do have to monitor future models here, because if, again, the biggest thing here is if she makes a landfall into Cuba somewhere, she will weaken, and this will make for a better situation here if she makes landfall somewhere along the west coast of Florida. So we will have to continue to monitor. However, if she moves on a track like this, we are really going to be in a nasty situation here because, you know, waters yet again out into this area are very, very warm. It is very warm waters. And so for as long as she's not over any major land masses, she is going to continue to strengthen and perhaps rapidly strengthen at periods of time. I do strongly believe over the next 24 to 48 hours, she is going to maintain Category 5 status here. I am almost certain of that. It starts becoming a little unclear when it gets to about 3 days out. It is possible she weakens down to a Category 4, but it is very possible that she continues being a Category 5 storm. Likewise, here is the model intensities. Now, this is significantly different from yesterday. Yesterday, most of the models were within Category 4 or strong Category 3 strength here, okay? Somewhere in this zone, okay? Over the course of the past 12 hours, she has really strengthened to a Category 5 very rapidly. More rapidly than what even the shortest of the short-range guidance has suggested. Okay, so I want to caution here, just because most of these models are going down to a strong Category 4 here, there are quite a few that keep her at Category 5 strength here. Even the National Hurricane Center says, you know, she's going to hover the line of Category 4, Category 5. So I really want to caution here that just because most of these models are bringing her down to Category 4 does not necessarily mean that that's going to be the case. Because really no model was suggesting up to this point, except for the GFS model, which I have to say has been pretty decent here. In the shorter range here, earlier on in the week, it was very, very crazy. GFS was printing out crazy solutions here. It brought her up into New England, New York City. But as we got, you know, closer and closer to this time frame, GFS has been relatively consistent and pretty scary. Some of these solutions that are being printed out are extraordinarily scary. So I really want to continue to monitor here what happens. Now, here is the GFS model. Let me bring us back here to the beginning here. So this is where she's at, or at least where she was at earlier on today. And notice she does make pretty much go right over the northern Leeward Islands here. So that is pretty much definite here that she is going to do that. GFS says nope, she is not going to make landfall in northeast Puerto Rico. So I think that will be good, but nevertheless, still significant impacts there. Now, here is the question. Notice we have this incredible, and I mean incredible trough. By the way, on another note here, we do have a slight risk of severe storms today here in New England, so you may want to keep an eye out on the sky here. But the storms that we're going to get here is nothing in comparison to Irma. But nevertheless, this front that's going to be moving through is actually going to somewhat impact Irma here. Now, the question or the big reason why, typically, if you have a significant trough like this, and this is what they were showing earlier in the week, you notice this trough here. Typically, especially if Irma was somewhere in here, okay, she would have gotten picked up by this trough and then gone out to sea like this. However, you notice where Irma is located. And you see, here is our high pressure right in here, okay? And you notice that it's nosing. You see how it noses in here? This is somewhat shielding Irma from being influenced by this trough, okay? this is what's preventing her from going out to sea. And let me tell you, an out-to-sea solution now, I just don't think is going to happen. I'm sorry to say. I really wish we had an out-to-sea solution here because, you know, it would prevent us from going through catastrophic situations. But unfortunately, doesn't look like that's going to happen. So this is what's preventing it from happening. This little nose right in here. Now, let's sort of move on here, okay? So we move on. I'm sorry. So we move on, okay? And notice this nose stays, okay? You notice the nose stays here over the course of the next several days. So this is why she's maintaining her western track here instead of curving up and out. That is the reason why she's staying on her course here. Now, the big question that occurs, okay, and I am going to somewhat show here, actually we'll look at it later on, but nevertheless, this trough starts to somewhat lift out, okay? Trough lifts out, and this high weakens, okay? And we have this little upper level low that's starting to develop out in the Gulf Coast states. So what's going to happen here is basically because this high is weakening, there is now enough of a room, or there's enough room here where she is able to curve up like this, because there's more influence from this high, from this upper level low than the high that is continuing to weaken. And you'll see that here in the following frames here. So you notice that high is weakening. We've got a little upper level low down in here. You'll continue to see it. There it is. It's starting to form now. Okay. And now notice she basically phases, or there's an interaction now between this upper level low and Irma itself. So this is now going to pivot her around. She is going to start pivoting around this upper level low to where she is going to start moving in this direction. And you'll see that, okay? See how she's now pivoting into Georgia and South Carolina here? And so basically, that's the reason why, okay? Also, the strength and location of this trough here is going to be critical, because if it's further south, okay, that means that this is going to force Irma more to the south rather than coming up, okay, because again, storms like to stay as far away from other influences, particularly stronger storms here than weaker ones, and basically further south a trough is versus forces a storm to further to the south. Okay, so therefore the GFS hovers right along the east coast of Florida here, which is pretty nasty. And she ends up making landfall, Georgia, around Savannah, Georgia, or Myrtle Beach, okay? And then she ends up moving up and out, and she ends up becoming an extratropical system and probably giving the Northeast some rain later on in the week if the GFS is correct. Now, here is Jose, and we'll look at what's going on here. Notice he turns out, and then basically the trough from Irma basically captures her. You see that? Basically, or captures Jose and brings her out to sea, which is a good solution because we don't want another hurricane, particularly on the heels of both Harvey and Irma, which were both major hurricanes here. Now, I want to show here what the GEFS, or the GFS ensembles, are showing. So this is basically at the same time. This is basically on Sunday, okay? And notice very close call for northern Cuba, but doesn't really quite make landfall according to the GFS ensembles here. Okay, and notice this is a horrific solution. Basically, goes right into Miami, Florida, and goes right up the coast, and basically continues her track right into Georgia and South Carolina. That's what the GFS ensembles are showing, and this is the mean. Okay, I will show the spaghetti plots later on, but let me show you some of the short-range guidance here. So this is Hurricane Irma, 921 millibars, which is a little stronger than what she was initialized at, but nevertheless, shows her pretty much maintaining Category 5 status, perhaps even strengthening a little bit at times, probably undergoing some eye wall replacement cycles. Basically, for those of you who don't know, perhaps this term has been sort of surfacing a little bit. Basically, an eye wall replacement cycle is basically when the storms or thunderstorms around the eye wall become pretty much at their peak. And basically what ends up happening is these storms end up collapsing. And so now the hurricane needs to regenerate thunderstorms again around the eye wall. So for a little period, the storm ends up having a lesser defined eye, and basically it ends up regenerating a bigger eye or more powerful eye or more well-defined eye. And typically this happens in very strong storms, very strong hurricanes. And a lot of times, as they undergo this eye wall replacement cycle, they'll weaken or maintain status for a little bit, but then they'll actually end up strengthening later on. So it looks like these short-range models are suggesting over the course of the next, we'll say, over the next couple of days here, she may be undergoing some more eye wall replacement cycles. However, she gets very close to, again, Cuba, and this particular model makes landfall in northern Cuba before she starts eyeing the Florida west coast here. So this particular hurricane model says no, she's going to be going into perhaps the Gulf of Mexico or the west coast here. Now, let me go back here. So this is actually more accurate. This is a pretty interesting hurricane model. This is, I believe, a relatively new one. This is a very accurate interpretation of what's currently going on. 929 millibars, that is basically where she's at. You go back here. Let me see here. We're gonna try here. We might actually have to go in here. So the current central pressure is 926. So this is very accurate here. Actually, a little bit stronger than what this model was at when it initialized. This strengthening here is a little concerning. Shows her strengthening to 890 millibars. Very possible. We'll have to monitor here, but not sure. Not sure if that's going to happen. But nevertheless, it maintains major Category 5 status here. And if this is correct, this would be the strongest hurricane on record. So we will really have to watch this. It does show her weakening a little bit to 908 millibars, but it's nothing to sneeze at here. It's still major, incredibly major, actually. This particular model takes her incredibly close to northern Cuba, but doesn't quite do that. shows her deepening to 881, 876, 865. I mean, this is just catastrophic here. And there is Florida. There is southern Florida here. And it shows her making landfall basically in Miami. And she ends up hugging the Florida coast. And this would be very concerning, because if her low pressure stays close, hugging the coast here, she may not have enough time to weaken, so she may actually maintain significant hurricane status, and that's where this stops. This particular hurricane model stops. Now, we're going to go with the GFS here, and this is actually weaker. This is the most recent GFS model. This is actually weaker than where she is at right now. And this is when what's actually happening is stronger than what the model shows, because basically the GFS model is actually taking all of the reconnaissance data and inputting it into the model. And the problem, even to a certain extent with the Euro, it's not really using this data as much. It's not really inputting the data, and particularly with the Canadian model, its strength is completely off. It is not even anywhere near what the strength is of the storm. So the GFS is closer to what the current data suggests. Now, we cannot disregard the Euro, but I would put a little bit more credence into the short-range guidance and the GFS model, since it's using actual data that is actually being done by the reconnaissance aircraft here. Now, the GFS actually shows her weakening a little bit over the course of the next couple hours. Not sure if that's going to be the case here. It looks like it shows her undergoing. If you look here, notice that there's the eye kind of weakens. If you go back here, see how there's this blue. This is a well-defined eye in here. GFS suggests that she's going to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle, and so notice she ends up actually deepening by sometime late tonight, early tomorrow morning. And 925 millibars here. This is pretty nasty. This is, about what it is right now. So the problem here is the GFS is weaker than what the current data is suggesting. So we'll have to see here. But nevertheless, GFS shows her pretty much maintaining Category 5 status right through the period. And it shows her basically missing, again, so it does look like she's going to miss Puerto Rico and the Northern Dominican Republic, nevertheless going to give some pretty nasty impacts here. Probably, strong tropical storm force or maybe even weak hurricane force wind gusts out there. And basically it shows her deepening as she goes out into Bermuda. And remember, or into the near Bermuda. Remember, this water in here is incredibly warm. So for as long as she stays off the coast of Cuba, she is going to strengthen. And this will be the favorable period of when she could perhaps become the strongest hurricane on record. We'll have to watch out for that. But nevertheless, here she comes. The GFS suggests she's going to deepen to an 896 millibar low. Just massive winds here. Just incredible. And it shows her hugging the Florida coast, somewhat similar to that very short-range model here that I was showing here. We'll go to 126. And notice this model is showing almost exactly what the HMON, very short-range model guidance, hurricane model guidance, and basically shows her ultimately making landfall around Savannah, Georgia, and eventually weakening here. So that's what's going on. Now, here is the thing. The Euro paints a completely different picture. And I want to sort of explain here. This is now when I'm going to get into the differences here between the Euro and the GFS. So again, notice she's going to go through the northern leeward. So this is pretty much this is going to happen. She's going to go through the northern leeward islands. Here is this high pressure, okay? And you see this nose, okay? You see that. So that's basically the same thing from the GFS. So we're going to go out here and we're going to go to hour 24, okay? So this is the GFS model. Here is the Euro. Pretty much exactly the same here. So we'll bring it down so you can kind of see it better. So, whoops, didn't mean to do that. So here is the Euro. Here is the GFS. Pretty much the same scenario. In pretty much the same exact scenario. I'm going to bring this up here. Sort of. So there it is. GFS Euro. Oh, this is the GFS ensembles. I'm sorry. I'm all over the place here. So here it is. And so now we move on. Okay. Here it is. She basically just misses the Dominican Republic here. So this is out to hour 48. So this is where we're at. Okay. Pretty much there's still, over the next couple of days, right to Thursday, they are in agreement. Okay. Notice on both of them, this area of high pressure is pretty much nosing out. Now, on the GFS, you have this area, this trough here. Notice pretty much the same on the Euro, pretty much exactly the same picture. So that's very good to see the same thing. And here's hour 72. Let's go out to hour 72 here. So we'll go. Here's 78. So this is 72. So here's GFS. Here's the Euro. This is somewhat when things start changing. So this is the Euro. Here is the GFS. Okay. Here is where the differences start coming. You notice this is the GFS. Here is the Euro. Somewhat a little different, okay? Pretty much the same thing, though. Here's the GFS. Here is the Euro. Ultimately the same thing. Here's hour 96, okay? This is where the differences start coming in. GFS, so this is 78, 96. Here it is. This is the difference. Euro, GFS. Euro, GFS. Notice it's slightly to the north. Why is that? Why is it slightly to the north? Well, this is the Euro, okay? It has the center of the trough pretty much over New Hampshire, Maine, okay? Round Jackman, Maine is where this upper level trough is. It sort of extends out to Nova Scotia and down into upstate New York. So this is where you've got this upper level trough. Now, watch where the GFS has it. Has it almost in Labrador. You see that? It's northern Nova Scotia, sort of extending out into Labrador. So it's further to the north, okay? And if we look also at the area of high pressure, notice it's ever so slightly stronger. So it's sort of imposing a little bit more of a westward push here. Not only that, if you look at the Euro to the GFS, notice this upper level low down in here is starting to be more shown a little bit more on the GFS, to where on the Euro, notice it's not as pronounced. You see that? Notice if you look at this bottom line right in here, okay, notice it's nosing down a little bit. That means the upper level low is a little bit stronger, just ever so slightly stronger. So that is the difference. Very, very, very minor changes, but it prints out a completely different scenario based on the GFS. So here is ultimately our 120 on the GFS. Here's our 120 on the Euro. This is where you have it. This is the difference, okay? Has basically, the GFS has it basically here, okay? Basically has it here, while the Euro has it here. And this makes a big difference for folks on the east coast of Florida, on up to Georgia and South Carolina, or perhaps the west coast of Florida, maybe into even parts, or maybe even into parts of Alabama. So we're going to really need to watch out. But right now, the area of basically the area where we're going to see the storm track, I think, is going to be anywhere from here over to here, okay? And again, the absolute furthest north I would take this is Wilmington, North Carolina, but there is not a whole heck of a lot of information to support that at this point, and I think I think it's too late. I don't think that there's going to be anything north of this line here. I just don't see it at this point. Now, here is the current GEFS ensembles, and this is basically the GFS model run many times, about 20 times here. And we're not really going to focus on north of really here at this point. Well, we can't really do that. We won't focus north of here. Okay, we're not going to focus north of here because that's when she starts becoming extratropical and all this other stuff. Now, notice, again, pretty much well agreement right through here. Okay, right into here. So basically it doesn't really show her making any landfall up to hour 72. So over the next 3 days, no landfall other than directly impacting the northern Leeward Islands, but because they're islands, it doesn't really impact the strength. Doesn't look like she's going to make any landfall. Let me look at the southwesternmost. It barely misses Puerto Rico. The southern ensemble here does take her over the northern part of the Dominican Republic. Now, there is a pretty good amount of ensembles that take her right up the East Coast, okay? Now, notice there is one ensemble that takes her out to sea. I think that window is pretty much closing, or if not closed at this point. We'll have to keep our eyes out on it, but I just don't see a lot of data to support that at this point. Nevertheless, over the next 4 days, so by the time we hit Thursday, that is again going to be the critical day. Where is she going to start making a turn more to the north, or is she going to make a turn towards Florida? And again, the big thing is, again, if we go here, where is this trough going to sort of set up? Okay, this is, we'll go to our 108 here, we'll go to the Euro, okay? You notice that the trough axis is slightly further to the south on the Euro, and this forces Irma further to the south, okay? And that's the reason why. Not only that, on the Euro, this trough is a little stronger, okay? I want to caution here because the Euro does somewhat have a bias of strengthening troughs a little too much, okay? So we're going to keep our eyes out on this trough, okay? If it's deeper than what the GFS is suggesting, notice it just deepens this thing incredibly, okay? This is hour 144. If we bring it out to hour 144, notice it's somewhat stronger, but it's not as strong as the Euro here. And that makes an impact, again, on the track of Irma. Okay, so we're going to keep our eyes out on this over the course of the next several days. So that ultimately gives a potential of her going along the Florida West Coast or the Florida East Coast. Nevertheless, if you live in Florida, you need to make preparations now. You need to start getting things ready. A lot of stores and, you know, your Walmarts and even grocery stores are starting to sell out of essential supplies. You probably are going to want to go on Amazon. Amazon has a lot of supplies that you can get, and they will ship it out to you, you know, by Thursday at the latest. So you can really get your supplies that you need. You really want to consider sealing up in plastic baggies, particularly big Ziploc bags, all of your important documents. Take pictures of them, send them to your email or to well-trusted friends. You know, make sure you have all of your contact information from your phone, and make sure you back that up somehow. You want to make sure that you just, you know, prepare, make sure you have gas, make sure you have money, some cash on hand. You really got to prepare for this because Florida is going to get impacted. In one way or another, Florida is going to get impacted. Whether it's a Category 3 or Category 5 storm, she is going to impact Florida, and it is very critical that you make preparations now. If, and I mean if, and this is a big if the GFS is correct on, and notice there's quite a few, okay, ensemble members that show this solution. If the GFS is correct, this would cause incredible damage to the Miami area down on the East Coast and southern Florida. This would be devastating, okay? Right now, if you live on the East Coast or on the West Coast of Florida, I would closely monitor things, make sure you're preparing significantly, because this is still a very the possibility is well there, okay, that this goes along the West Coast. I would say right now, if I were to have to choose, I would go with the further east track at this point. Because, again, if we look at all of the hurricane guidance here, the short-range hurricane guidance, I'm going to go back here. Notice most of it is taking it up and along the east coast of Florida, okay? Most of it, okay? Including the GFS, including some pretty, very well-respected short-range hurricane models. So I am leaning more towards this, okay, at this point, but this does not, you are definitely not out of the woods on the west coast of Florida, because that is still a very good possibility at this point. And even if she does go over Cuba, a lot of these models have her re-strengthening to a major hurricane. Even the Euro has her going back down to about 940 or 930, which is pretty formidable. That's still a Category 4 storm. So, you know, we'll have to watch out for this. But nevertheless, Florida is going to get impacted. I would be on guard if you live Georgia, particularly if you live Georgia, South Carolina, and up to, actually not that far north, I would watch out if you live anywhere in here, okay? Anywhere in here, particularly from Georgia to North Carolina. Perhaps you may want to monitor things if you live up into the Outer Banks of North Carolina, north of Wilmington. But right now, this is my high-risk area. My high-risk area, basically, if I were to make a cone here, this would be my cone. I would bring this here, and then I would have my extent here coming in like this, and then up like this. This would be my cone at this point, okay? Notice there's not a lot of change here over the next couple of days or few days. The big change here comes on Thursday. This is when the big change happens, okay? So that's my thoughts at this point, okay? It's been about an hour here, but you know, this is a catastrophic situation and potentially dangerous situation for all of Florida on up to Wilmington, North Carolina. This whole area in here needs to monitor things very carefully, and this could be very dangerous for these folks in here. Even if Irma tracks in like this right on through the central part of Florida, the wind fields are going to be massive. Part of Irma will be impacting on the East Coast and on the West Coast, so we'll watch out for that. So right now, that is my thoughts. I will give more updates as time moves on, and hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Again, watch out here in New England. Keep your eye to the sky. There's a potential of some severe storms later on, so just keep your eye to the sky here. Take care.